Tentacles, Chapter 15, What Dinosaurs Eat for Breakfast. Ouch, Luther said, shaking his latex-gloved finger, which one had just bitten. Why does everything aboard want to bite me? It might be a good idea not to wave your finger right in front of its mouth, Wolf said. Yeah, Luther said. And Bo hasn't bitten you, Marty pointed out. She just yanked your hair out, which your own father has been trying to do for years. Strip your glove off, Wolf said. Disinfect your hands, bandage your finger, then put on fresh gloves. Look at one, Laurel said. It looks like it's enjoying the taste of Luther's blood. I think you're right, Wolf said. One was licking its tiny teeth with a purple tongue. Do you think there's enough of Luther to feed them until we get back to Kryptos? Marty asked. I think so, Grace said. If we feed him to them slowly, a bit at a time. Oh, you two are really funny, Luther said from the sink. You should tour comedy clubs. A Mokum bite might be venomous. Did you ever think of that? You might be right, Marty said. You should probably go into the infirmary. No thanks, Dr. Jones has his hands full, or stainless steel bucket full, with that woman who puked all over your shoes, which was way funny. How is Anna? Laura asked. Not nearly as seasick as I was, much to Dr. Jones' disappointment. He asked if she played chess, and she said no. Poker's her game. He lost interest in her immediately, gave her some pills, and sent her to her cabin to rest. Wolf, intense as always, didn't appear to be listening to their conversation. He was totally focused on the hatchlings, scribbling something on the clipboard. He handed the clipboard to Grace. I've made up a temporary feeding chart. I'll make up an official chart and make copies when I get back to my quarters. We'll need to mark down everything we feed them to the very last gram. When they're not eating, I need all of you to write down exactly what they are doing every 5 minutes. I thought that's why you had the video camera, Luther said. Can't you just review the tape? Wolf shook his head. You need to learn everything we can about these animals, and the only way to do that is through direct observation. He smiled, and jotting down what you see will only keep you awake. Right now, the hatchlings are curiosities. We're all excited about them. After a couple of days of watching them 24/7, they'll be about as interesting as chickens in a barnyard. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I've spent most of my life observing animals. In no time, you'll start taking them for granted. And we aren't saving the video on tape. It will be stored on the hard drive. When you note something unusual, we'll be able to find the video instantly by searching the time log. He pointed to a digital clock above the incubator. The clock is tied into the computer. Note the exact time whenever you record an observation. Grace and Laura understood the scientific necessity of what Wolf was saying perfectly. Luther and Marty glanced at each other and stiffened groans. Raising dinosaur babies didn't sound half as fun as it had 5 seconds earlier. Wolf looked at a container out of the refrigerator and dumped its gooey red contents onto the stainless steel counter. What's that? Marty asked. Pulverized organic chicken livers mixed with fish. Wolf pinched the red goo with a pair of forceps and put on a digital scale, carefully removing stringy bits and pieces until the scale read exactly 6 grams, or a little over 2 ounces. Note the time and the amount of food, he said to Grace. We'll be feeding one first. He dangled the slimy red hunk over the opening, and both 1 and 2 lunged violently for the morsel. 1 beat 2, nearly pulling the forceps out of Wolf's hand. The group watched in shock as the lump worked its way down 1's throat. Both hatchlings began mewing and jumping. They like meat, Wolf said, stating the obvious. Carnivores, Grace said. I thought sauropods were vegetarians. I guess they're not sauropods, Wolf said. I suspected as much when Rose and I were. He looked at Grace uncomfortably. Grace finished the sentence for him. Attacked? Right. When you were in the nest, did you see any bones? There could have been bones, Marty answered, but I don't notice any. We were a little distracted by the rotting Mokum carcasses, the eggs, the vultures, and the explosion when Marty blew up the Mokum, the resulting fire, and Butch McCall waiting outside the entrance to the nest, Grace interrupted. I didn't mean to blow it up, Marty said defensively, and the fire was minor. But you're right about Butch. I was a little worried about him. I saw a few bones in the nest, Laurel said. She had stayed behind at Lake Tell to monitor the nest's environmental conditions. The data she gathered had been transmitted to the incubator's controls to help duplicate the conditions of the real nest. Perhaps Mokum ate the animal's meat and bones. We'll stick with meat for now, Wolf said. We can sprinkle it with calcium powder in case that's an essential part of their diet. Their teeth are sharp, but not big enough at this moment to masticate bone. He handed 2 pairs of forceps to Luther and Grace. Try to feed them at the exact same time at opposite ends of the incubator, Wolf said. That way, there's less of a chance that they bite each other. Their skin looks thin. I don't want to have to treat them for lacerations. An hour later, with everyone taking turns feeding them, the hatchlings were finally satiated. They lay down with bulging bellies and fell asleep with their long necks entwined around each other. Wolf looked at the chart and did some calculations. They ate each nearly a pound of meat. That's incredible for their first meal. Who knows how much they'll be eating in a couple of weeks, or how big they'll be, Luther added. Good point, Wolf said. They could outgrow the incubator in a few days. We'll put a floor pen in the lab, but they might outgrow that too before we get back to Kryptos. We may have to move them out of the lab. The question is where and how without anyone seeing them. How about the cargo hold, Marty said. That might work. All we have down there is a few shipping containers. I'll get in touch with Ted and have him come up with a design. He looked at Laurel. I'm going to be a little busy trying to catch a giant squid. We've spent more time in the nest than anyone. Did you want to head up to the dinosaur nursery construction? I'll be happy to. I'll get Phil to help along with a couple of crew members I know we can trust. Grace and Luther can help too when they're not taking care of the hatchlings. What about me? Marty asked. You're going to be busy, Wolf answered. Doing what? Bertha needs your help in the galley. Let me get this straight, Marty said. While you're catching a giant squid and Laurel and Phil are building a Dino land and Grace and Luther are taking care of the 2 rarest animals on Earth, I have kitchen patrol? I'm afraid so, Wolf answered. We've all got to do our part. Marty had no problems doing his part, but he didn't expect to have such a small part. He wasn't happy about it. I'm sorry, Marty, but Bertha needs you down there. If we don't improve the grub, we'll have a revolt on our hands. Marty thought it's a miracle we don't have one already from the revolting food. Wolf had made a mistake putting Theo in charge of the galley, even temporarily. Al Ikes was probably a better cook than Theo. Are you all right with that? Wolf asked. Fine, Marty answered curtly. Good. Wolf looked at his watch. Grace and Luther will take the next shift in here. If the hatchlings wake up and look hungry, feed them and record them out. Dip the meat in water before you offer it to them. We need to keep them hydrated. What about the calcium powder? Grace asked. I think we'll skip it for a couple of feedings. I don't want them getting constipated. I need to examine their stools and see where we're at before we go overboard with supplements. When they poop, scoop it up and put it in one of the specimen containers with the time in which the stool belongs. I need to check on some things. Then I'll call Ted and get him started on the nursery design. He looked at Laurel. Can you track Phil down? He's probably on the bridge swapping war stories with Cap. Fill him in on what's going on. Maybe you and he can look around the cargo hold and figure out where to put the nursery. Wolf and Laurel walked out, with Marty trailing behind, dejectedly. Have fun on KP, Luther said. Marty turned around before the airlock door slid closed. Have fun scooping dinosaur doo-doo, he said.